Hi, in this video we introduce functions, and by the time we finish you will be able to write your own functions. So we have been working with functions for a while now. One of the first functions you learned to use was the print function. So let's take a look at that here. So let me comment this out first. So how did I do this? I didn't type hashtag over and over and over. All I did was select all of this and then hold Control and press /. So that's the slash right above the control button on most computers. If you want to uncomment it, you just do like that. Again, Control //. So that's a quick way to deactivate code. So now I can just simply write print, and notice I can write print and I can write, let's say, 8, and it works. So we've been working with functions for a while. We also have the type function, so I can say type, and suppose I want to know the type of this of 6. Well, that's an int. So let's uncomment this. I can go and check the type of 6. Let me get that. We can also check the type of x, because x is a variable and it has a type, and of course it's int. The type of z, we assigned it hello, which is a string in this case, and so we have the types. Now what we can do is we can combine this and use the type in a print statement. So let me uncomment all of this. So here now I'm going to use this format method. So what's the difference between this method here, which is like a function? Notice it's format and then I have a parenthesis, just like with print and with type. So the only difference is that, or at least the major difference is that I can use the print function alone. I can use the type function alone. I just write type and place a value. But this format function, at least this specific one here, think of it as belonging to a string. So this is a string here, from the opening quotation to the closing quotation. And this string owns format. So if I just type format like that, it won't work. So this string has in its possession the ability to format values that are given to it. So we'll look at this in more detail when we do object-oriented programming. So for now, this is really a function that belongs to an object, in this case the string. When we deal with functions that belong to objects, we tend to call them methods, but essentially it's the same thing. So here I have a string, and then it has a placeholder, and in this placeholder I'll place the type. So this should be easy for you to understand. The variable x is of type, and then I place in there the type of x, and so on. So let's run this, and we see we get these results. We see the variable z is of type and it tells you a string. We have the abs function also, and we can do this. So the abs function is a standalone function, and here in this case then I have two variables, x, which is given a float, and y, which is given an integer. And so I have these two statements here, and with placeholders, and in this placeholder I'll place the value stored in this variable, and here I'll put the absolute value of it. So the absolute value is just the number without a sign. Let's say that like that. There's a more formal way of defining absolute value, but the easiest way to remember absolute value, it's just the number without a sign. So -5, the absolute value is 5. 3, the absolute value is 3. So notice the absolute value of -8.3 is 8.3. The absolute value of 45 is 45. So there are many functions that come built into Python, and many of the objects have a format function, which as it says here, should be called a method. So how do we call a function? Well, we have been calling functions for a while now. You simply write the name of the function along with the parentheses and along with the argument. So the argument is the value you need to provide. So you may provide a literal value like, say, hello. I can type hello in here in quotation marks, or I can first assign hello to a string. So I can call this x or y, or output string, or the string to be printed or whatever, and then place that variable in here. So in the case of print, I can give it a variable, an argument. I can give it no argument. So print has like a default. If you don't give it an argument, it prints what's called a new line character, and so you just get a blank line. And here you can give it more than one argument. So 2 arguments are being provided here. And so when we run this, you see we get hello, then we get blank line, and then we get hello world. In case you're wondering about the new line character, the new line character is what tells the computer to go to another line, so you don't actually see it. So let me comment this out and show you what I mean. I can comment control / and then I can write, let's say, print. Let's just make a new string, and then I can say hi, and then I go \n, how are you, \n, I hope you are fine. Now when I run this, oh, I need to print it. Sorry, I just assigned it, but I didn't print it, so I have to go print x. Hi, how are you? I hope you are fine. I should have put a space here. Let's do that again. So if I just write print like this with nothing, well, the function automatically prints out a \n character, which means a new line character. Okay, so I hope you understood that. So let's just look at this again. You can take this out, uncomment that, and run it, and then we get hello world. I recommend that you look at this video. So on your worksheet, simply click on this link and look at it. It's version 2.7 of Python, but the information is still very relevant. So now we look at making our own functions. So all these functions that we have been using, print and abs and type, somebody else wrote these, and you may need to write your own function. So remember what a function is. It's a block of code that you want to use over and over. Now you could go and copy and paste a block of code over and over, in your program. But then let's suppose you need to make a change to that code. Then you would have to go and find everywhere that you had pasted that code and fix it. When you have a function defined, you just call the function because you give that block of code a name. And if you need to make a change, you simply go and change it in the one place where it was defined. So here's an example of a function we're going to define. We're going to call it my function. So this is just a name I made up like that. You could call it foo or gg or just f. You can call it whatever you like, as long as you follow the basic rules for naming variables. And in this function, what I'm doing, instead of having to write print statements, let's suppose I simply need to print 2 lines every now and again. I get tired of copying and pasting these 2 print statements or typing them out. Well, I can just write a function that contains these 2 print statements. Now, a little word of caution here. Practically, never should you put print statements in a function. Now, that's not like a real rule, but kind of make it a rule. In other words, if you find yourself putting a print statement in a function, you're probably making a mistake. So think about it. You should only put print statements in a function if your function is going to do nothing else but print. And you just want to make the process of printing easier, so you don't have to type out all those print statements. Otherwise, don't. If the function does something for you and calculates a value and then you want to print it, do that separately. Get the value and then print it. So I'll talk about this in more detail shortly. So here we have the function. How do we define a function? First you write def, then you write the name, then you write these parentheses. So this function does not take any arguments. And then in the body of the function, notice the indentation. If I write something over here at this level of indentation, if I write a print statement here, this print statement will not be a part of a function. So it's very important. Notice the alignment. You have to be very strict about that. So now if I run this cell, nothing happens. All that happens is that the function has been defined. Now I can call it. So let's remove this from here and put that there original because I wanted to show something. So I'm just going to call the function as we have done in the past. Notice. And now if at some other point in my program I want to print these 2 lines again, I just have to call my function. Now all functions are expressions, and all expressions represent a value. Here it might not be obvious what the value is, but let's just say I type here typ and I place this like this. Notice what we get. I get the none type. So what happened here? This was evaluated to a certain value, but this value is none. Now it might seem strange to you that we have a special value for nothing, but if you think about it, it shouldn't be so strange. For centuries, human beings had numbers and did not realize they needed a number for 0, for nothing. In programming, the same thing happened. We need something to represent nothing. So none represents nothing. So when this function is evaluated, it's evaluated to none. Later on, we'll see that most functions don't do that. Functions tend to evaluate to something. Now, notice if I take off these, it's no longer a function call. I'm just typing the function. So the function won't be called, and all I'll get is function. In other words, this is telling you that the type of this variable is a function. This represents a function. So note the distinction, right? This is referring now to the function. When I do this, the call is made, the function executes, and then it's evaluated, and it's evaluated to the non-type. So notice the function is called. So for your first task, you should add more statements to this, just to practice. So make sure you do that. Parameters. When you call a function, very often you want to give the function something to work with. And so when you define the function, the variable that represents the information that is to be given to the function is referred to as a parameter. When you call the function and you give it that value, the value you're giving it is called the argument. So this is a useful distinction so that we understand when we are talking about the definition of the function and when we are talking about actually calling the function. So here is a function, and you're going to give this function a parameter and its name. So here you begin to see even more maybe the flexibility that this format method gives you, because this function now at the time of its creation doesn't know what actually it's going to print out, what name it's going to print out. It's when you call the function, then you supply the name. So notice inside the function I have the statement with a placeholder, and in this placeholder we place the value supplied as an argument. In other words, this parameter is going to be associated with some argument that is supplied. So if we come down here and look at this, here we see that I can type in, let's say, my function, and I can type John. And when I run this function, I have a mistake. And what is the mistake? Maybe I didn't run this. Let me write this. Right, there it is. The system remembered this definition, and that's not the one I want. And so it complained that, hey, I didn't give it, a value. So hello John. Let's run this again, but now I can write Sue. It says hello Sue. I can even say you, which is bad manners. Hello you. Hope you're having a good day. Right? Again, if I don't give it anything, it'll complain now because it's expecting that parameter. So it says missing one required positional argument. Right? It's missing fname. You did not give it an argument. Notice it says argument, not parameter, because the parameter is there in the definition of the function. It's just that when I call it, I didn't give it an argument. Okay, so I hope this is to understand this. I can call this Fred. I can say Fred, and notice hello Fred. Hope you're having a great day. Now, if you remember the print statement, that if you didn't give it a function, it still like printed something. That's because it has a default value. So here, let's see how we can work with the default value. Now I'm going to redefine my function. Notice that this print statement didn't do anything because I'm only defining the function. I didn't actually call the function. So when you just define a function, the system then becomes aware of what all it has to do when the function is called, but it won't do it until you actually call the function. So here, this function will take two parameters, will take two arguments. It has two parameters, a first name and a country. But now I have a default value, which means now that if the person who calls this function doesn't supply a value for the country, it'll automatically use Belize. So again, we have a string here with two placeholders, and it says hello blank from blank, hope you're having a great day. And then in the first one, it's supposed to use fname, and in the second placeholder, it's supposed to use country. If no country is given, it'll just use Belize. So here we go. My function, John, Sweden. See? Hello John from Sweden. I can change this to Sarah, and this to Cuba, and hello Sarah from Cuba, hope you're having a great day. So again, I hope you see the value and the flexibility that this approach to printing offers. This print statement can print anything you want it to print, and it can fill in the placeholders at the time when you call the function. Now let's suppose we call the function but only give it a name and no country. Well, then we do like this, and we see that it says hello Maria from Belize. It did not complain that you didn't give it a country because it had a default value. We can go back here, for example, where it said this is my function fname. Now let's suppose I don't give it this name. It'll complain. You need to have a parameter. But I can just call this you, which is poor manners. But notice now, if I don't give it a parameter, if I don't give it an argument, it just uses the default. So I hope you understand how to use default parameter values. Now, return values. It is important that you think of a function when you define a function, or in general when you think of functions, as just a black box that takes some values as input, you give it something as arguments, it does something, and then it returns a value. So what is this value that is returned. What does that mean? What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about essentially what the function evaluates to. So remember, a function is an expression, and you can replace a function with a value once it's run. So let's define a function here. So this is a new definition, so I have to press Shift Enter. So now my function has been redefined. This takes one argument and returns 5 times that value. So I could have called this multiply by 5 or something like that. So notice now I can simply call this function like this. I can say my function 12 times 2, and then I can print the value of x after using the function is blank, and then there I put whatever x is. So this entire thing here is, this function is called and it's evaluated. But now this does not evaluate to none. This actually returns a value. So let me comment this out first and show you what I'm talking about. If I come here and I do this, type, and I put my function and I give it, let's say 5, it's an int. So my function evaluates to an int. It does not evaluate to none. It evaluates to the type of what is returned. So this takes a number here and says 5 times that number. And of course, if this was a integer, then it returns an integer. If this was a float, it returns a float. Right? So let's see if I'm telling the truth here. Type of 8.2 float. See? So this whole thing then is a value. So think of a function call as a value. It's an expression. It's just like if instead of writing my function in here, I wrote 5 times 8.2. This is how the system is seeing it. So let's get back here then and run this function. So I define the function and I run it. So the value of x after using the function is 120. So this function, when this is called, this evaluates to 60 because you give it a 12, and then inside the function it says 5 times 12 and returns what? 60. So this function then is replaced, this expression is replaced by the value to which it evaluates, which is 60. And then it's multiplied by 2, which gives us 120. And then that 120 is placed in this place folder here. So be aware of some things here. A function should perform one and only one task. This is why I was saying you shouldn't put print statements. So sometimes students are tempted to put like a print statement in here. Notice I did not put this print statement inside the function. I did not say print 5 times x. So this is a very common error. Students who are learning the program like to put the print in here, like this function, and they'll say print 5 times x. No, this returns 5 times x. If you want to print this, then you get that value and print it. Notice I didn't have to do it this way. I could have taken all of this, erase this, and inside of here. But I would discourage working like this. It begins to, when you start to do things like this, it begins to make the code harder to read. And yes, you might look smarter because you can do everything in one line, but then the objective is to write code that other people can read and maybe fix or amend in some way easily enough. So this isn't too bad though, right? So what we're having here, remember, this is a value. So this function evaluates to, this function call evaluates to 60, then this expression evaluates to 120, and then 120 is given to this format, which function or method, which places it in this placeholder. So we see no difference then in the result. So function does one and only one thing. Again, do not ever put a print statement in a function unless you're sure that that's all you want the function to do. Print. Printing is a separate job. Make sure you use meaningful names. So these names haven't been too nice, you know. They didn't call print my function 1 and type my function 2. This is called print, so you understand what it's doing, and type, you can understand from the name what it's doing. So give your functions meaningful names. Remember, indentation is important. So indentation is how the system knows what's inside your function and what is not. You should document your functions. What does it mean to document your function? Well, let's look at this. There's a help function, right? Let's take a look at the abs function. We already know what the abs function does. And so here it tells you, right? It returns the absolute value of the argument. I can also find help on the help function itself. And notice we get a lot of information here. Right? So it would be nice if when you wrote your own functions, you documented them. And how do you document them? Well, you use this format here. 3 double quotes to open, 3 double quotes to close. And you should do it like this. Don't do it all in one line. So this is a function that takes a value and doubles it. So if you give it 5, it returns 10. If you give it 12, it returns 24. Very simple function. And it says here, this function will return a value equal to twice that which it receives, and then it tells you what the x should be, the number whose value will be doubled. Suppose now, we didn't understand what the heck double it does. So I call help on double it. Notice I don't have parentheses here because I'm not making a function call. I just want to know about the function. So I just give it the name of the function. And notice it says the same thing I have here, right? This function will return a value equal to blah blah blah. Of course, now when I call the function, I can use this like this. So print double it 15. So double it 15, remember, evaluates to 30 because it returns twice the value given. So let's run this, and we get 30. Here is an example of a function that squares. So you can pause the video and read this. It returns x times x. There's another way to do this, right? But for right now, x times x is good enough. We define it, and if I say help on square it, notice I get information, and then I can place the function call inside a print statement and get print the square root of 4. So understand how this works. The innermost calls get done first and they move out. The outermost can't be done first because if you say, well, print what? It won't know what to print. Square what? Well, it won't know what to square unless you give it a value. So obviously it takes a value 4 and then it squares it. It knows what to square, not return 16. And now this print statement knows what to print. It prints the 16 that this evaluated to. So notice 16. We can make this a little bit more complicated. This print statement won't know what to print until this finishes doing what it's supposed to do. But this can't do what it's supposed to do because it doesn't know what this is until it does its job. And double it, what is its job? It's supposed to double this value. So let's look at this. Let's see if we understand this then. M is 5, so double it. We'll take this 5 and return 10. And then square it will now square this value that's here. This value here now is what? The value in here is 10. And so the square of 10 is 100. So let's do that. And we see the result. So here is a task. That this function accepts a number and returns true if it's even and false otherwise. So it seems that I've done this for you here. I didn't mean to, but anyway, there we go. You get a number, and how do you know if it's even? Well, you just find the remainder. So x modulus 2 gives you the remainder. And if that remainder is 0, then obviously this number x is even and you return true. And of course, if this is false, then we do the alternative else and return false. And then we call the function here. So I get a number, I convert it to an int, and then I just call the function. If is even x. So what is this doing? This is checking to see if x is even. This entire function then gets replaced with true if it's even, and then this gets printed. If this gets replaced with false, then obviously this isn't done, but rather this is done. So let's run this. Enter an integer, let's say 4. You entered an even number. Let's run it again. Let's enter 5. You entered an odd number. So notice how we can place then this kind of conditional logic inside of a function. So here are some tasks. Write a function that accepts a number and returns true if it's divisible by 5 and false otherwise. So how do you know if it's divisible by 5? So you can take this very same function and all you have to do is replace this by 5. If it is divisible by 5, the remainder will be 0. So that's pretty much it. And then you define the function here, call the function here. So basically it's going to be pretty much this, except for the 2 will be replaced by 5. And then you should change this. So give the function a nice name. Don't call it is even. Call it is divisible by 5. That would be a nice name. And so here when you call it, you call if is divisible by 5, and then obviously here you're going to say you entered a number divisible by 5. Remember, an even number is just a number divisible by 2. So now here you need to check if it's an odd number and if it's divisible by 3. So how do we check this? We say, well, if x, the remainder after dividing it by 2 has to be 0 and has to be 1 rather. For it to be an odd number, it has to be 1. The remainder has to be 1. And if you divide it by 3, the remainder has to be 0. Right? And so that's it. And then you put return true. and then else, and then you can finish this from here, right? So notice we looked at this in a previous video, right? So for this entire statement to be true, both have to be true. That's what this AND means. So this entire thing is an expression, and it can only evaluate to true or false. It evaluates to true only when these two are true. In other words, the remainder after dividing by 2 is 1, which means it's odd, and the remainder after dividing by 3 is 0, which means it's, well, divisible by 3. So make sure you do these. So here we have to write a function that accepts an argument named weight and returns double the weight. So find a nice name for this. I know this is a nonsense function, but still try and be inventive. So it returns a double of that value if it's greater than 65. So what you have to do, the function has to check to see if the number it receives is greater than 65. And then if it's true, it simply returns twice that value. And if it's less, it returns triple that, 3 times that value, if it's less than or equal. So make sure you know how to do this. Alright, so that's it for this video. You now can write your own functions.